Systems and Solutions, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how we can process files that are uploaded via Microsoft Forms using Microsoft Power Automate. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to be doing everything in the Microsoft Teams environment, and there are a couple of reasons why I'm going to do that. One is it keeps everything kind of contained to a nice area, a nice container. But the other reason is if for some reason I move on to another department or my position changes or I leave the college, it is easier to pass off this process or what I've created to another person if it's in the Microsoft team. And that's because the Microsoft team will be the owner of the process. And so all that we have to do is change the membership of the team, and the new members can then take over the process. But let's go ahead and get started here. What I am going to walk through is I'm going to walk through a process where we'll create a Microsoft form that will allow you to upload multiple documents to a single question, and then it will save the response to a SharePoint list, and it will also break out the forms that are uploaded into clickable links that you can just click on, and it will open up that document that you want. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and create the Microsoft form. So I'm going to go up here and add a tab. And I am going to go ahead and click on the Forms app here. Now, if you do not see Forms or any of the other stuff that we're going to be looking at, you can always type in the name of the app that you want up in the search box here, and it will show you all the apps that match that name. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be working with is just basic Microsoft stuff, so we're going to be using the Microsoft apps with it. Just note that if you are trying to do the link in third-party applications, there may be some account information or subscription thing that might block you on that. So if you do want to create a process that links in with a third-party process or application, I would recommend contacting ITS just to make sure it's all right to do that. And if not, then we can help you find a solution that is with stuff that we have. So let's go ahead and start with the Microsoft form. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new form here. So I'm going to do file upload. Form. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and save this. And so I'm going to go ahead and just add in a question here. I'm going to go ahead and add in a file upload. And you'll get this disclaimer here, and that's just telling you that the files are going to be shared in the SharePoint, or not shared, it's going to be saved in the SharePoint file document repository. If you were using your own personal off Microsoft 365 account, so if I went to Forms here, going through this side, it would save everything to my OneDrive. So this is just letting you know that everything's going to be saved in the SharePoint site. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And the one thing I should also say is that the way that SUNY Oneonta has our Microsoft team environment set up is with SharePoint on the back end. So every Microsoft team has a Microsoft SharePoint site on the back end of it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rename this to upload your files. All right, and so let's go through some of the options here. We have a file number limit. Now, this can go from anywhere between 1 and 10. I'm going just to do 2 just because that will show the concept of what I'm trying to do. But you can say 5, you can say 3. So I'm just going to set that for 2. Then you have the file size limit. Now this is, you only have these 3 options, the 10 megabyte, the 100 megabyte, and the 1 gigabyte. The way I look at it is the 10 megabyte is good if you're asking for forms or documents that are like text only. Those are often below 10 megabytes. If you're dealing with a really large document or a document that's got a lot of pictures in it, 100 megabytes might be the better one for that. If you're dealing with videos, well, then you may want to branch out into the 1 gigabyte. Do you know that there is limited files capacity in a SharePoint site. So, I would just recommend trying to stay with the 10 megabyte or the 100 megabyte as you can. And so then we have the required flag. So I'm going to hit required because we want files with this. And then you have a couple of other options here. You've got subtitle, and that you can do a description below the question. And you got file type. Now, file type is one I always like to select because I only want files of a particular type for processing. And so for this, I'm going to say I will only take Word files and PDF files. If someone tries to upload an Excel, PowerPoint, an image, video, or audio file, it's going to say, hey, wait a minute here, I can't accept this file type. Please give me a Microsoft Word document or a PDF document. All right. And so before we move on, the one thing I do want to capture though is the form ID, and that's going to be important when we get to the Microsoft Power Automate step on this. So I'm going to go ahead and come to my collect responses. I'm going to copy the URL with this, and then I'm going to come over into my file text editor. I'm going to paste that. And here's the ID of the form. So you'll see in the URL here after the response page.aspx question mark, you have ID is equal to, and you got this really crazy string of text here. So you want to copy that, and I'm just going to paste that here just so that it is easier to see. So that's the form ID, and we will need that when we get to the Power Automate stage on this. Well, let's go ahead and actually set up our SharePoint list now. So I'm going to come add a tab, and I'm going to come to SharePoint list. And we're going to click on Save, and I want to create a new list. Now, you have a bunch of templates that you can work with. You can import a list from an existing list that you have access to from Excel, but I'm going to do a blank list here. And so I'm going to just say this is going to be my form responses. And let's go ahead and make that red and do check the clipboard with that. All right, so now we want to set up our SharePoint list. And so this is like a database table. It's a really good way of looking at it. You have the title column here, and that's by default that you cannot delete or change or remove. You can rename it a bit, but it still keeps that title with it, so I would just keep it the same. The way I use it is I'll use that to I'll store the form response ID in that column. Well, let's go ahead and add a person column, and this is going to be who submitted the form. So submitted by. And I can use this because then I can actually access more information about the user who submitted it. I might also add in a text column here for department. And that I can just show how we can pull information from Microsoft and actually populate the SharePoint data a bit with it as well. And now we want to add in the columns for our files. Now I like using the hyperlink data type. So if I click on add column in hyperlink, what this is now going to let me do is actually put in a link to the file where we can click on it and go to the actual document. So I'm going to go ahead and just do file 1. And then I'm going to add another hyperlink for file 2. All right, so now our SharePoint list is pretty much set. We've got some user data that we want to record. We got the file 1, file 2 columns set in here. So now let's actually go and build our Power Automate process. So to do that, I'm going to add another tab up here, and I'm going to come down to Power Automate. And I want to save this. Now, Power Automate's a really good tool. I use it a lot in a lot of different aspects of my work and all that. So, it can be a very powerful tool that can help you manage a lot of data if needed. So I'm going to come up to New Flow, and it's going to kind of create start me off from scratch. So first I want to do is I want to retitle this. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say this is going to be my Power Automate form file upload. All right, So we got the name. I want to trigger off a Microsoft form, and so I want you to do when a new response is submitted. Now, here's where it gets a little funky when you're doing Power Automate within a Microsoft team. If I click on the options here, it's going to show me all of the Microsoft forms that are in my personal Microsoft 365 environment. It's not going to show me the form that I just created in the team. So that's where we come down to the custom value, and that's where we want to actually copy and paste this form ID here. All right. I kind of wish Microsoft would update this a little bit, but it's just one of those things that we have to work with. The other little nuance that I really want to give a strong disclaimer on is when you're working with Power Automate in a Microsoft team environment, you want to save it as often as you can. If you exit out of this without saving, it will not auto-save your changes and you'll lose the work that you did. So after you set in the trigger, you have to do at least one more action in order to be able to hit that save button. So just a FYI, you want to kind of plan that out a little bit. All right, so now I want to get the response details from the form. So there is a action that I can utilize for that. That's the get response details here. And same thing with the form ID, you need to come down, let's select custom value and paste in that form ID. And in the response ID, we want the response ID of the trigger. So we got that. And now we're ready to roll. So I'm going to save this right now so that I don't lose anything as we're going. Okay, so after it's saved, we want to now set up our variables. And the variables in this process are going to be kind of key for everything. So there's three variables that we need to work with. There's going to be the file1, file2 link, and then the account variable. And the count variable is important because that's going to be in kind of the when we're actually pulling the information for the files. So the way this works in Power Automate is we have to initialize the variables first. So if you go to New Step and let's do variables, you'll see that you have these different actions here. You've got initialize, set, increment, decrement, and a couple of other things. So we want the initialize variable here first. So this is going to be file1, and I want this to be set to string. Now I am going to set the initial value to null. And the way you do that is you click over in expressions here, you type null in here, and you can select that. The reason why I recommend doing this is it does then set all the variables to a constant. Leaving it blank doesn't always mean it's a null value, and that null value can be critical, or that distinction can be critical depending on how you're using it. So I always like setting things to null, at least initially. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do initialize variable file1, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this to my clipboard because I'm going to be doing this again for another two variables. So I'm actually going to copy to my clipboard, and then under new steps, if I come to my clipboard here, you'll see that I've got that variable, that action I just did, and I can just come through and update. I don't have to redo that value. I can rename this to file2. All right, and then I'm actually going to go to a new step, and I'm actually going to go back and do this one by hand. Because this is a little bit different. So I want to initialize variable. I want to name this count. And let's go ahead and rename this to count. This is going to be an integer, and I'm going to set this value to be a 1. Now this is going to go through when we're looking at the pulling the link out of the response details. This will go through and make sure that we enter in that link in the appropriate column. All right, so now that we got our columns set up, let's go ahead and actually do get the user's information action. So there's a Office 365 users connector here, and there's a lot that you can get here, but what we want is we want to get the user profile. All right. And what we can do here is under the user UPN, which is the user's principal name, if we come and use the responder's email address here, we can now query the system for the user's department, first name, last name, job title, email address. There's a lot of information that we can actually get now, and embed that into our process. All right, so now I'm actually going to save the initial stuff to SharePoint. And so if I go and look for our SharePoint connector, you'll see we have a bunch of actions. We want this create item action here, all right, because this is what's going to allow us to save the item to SharePoint. So it's going to ask us for the site address. So if we actually kind of click in here, I want to find the Microsoft form file upload demo. So there's that. If you can't find it in the list, you can do custom, and you see like this hyperlink I have here. You just copy and paste that into the site address, and then it will work if it doesn't show it. But if it shows it, it's a little better doing it that way. So we want to select form responses. And now we actually want to start populating it. Now, the first three fields I'm going to populate, file 1, file 2, we're not going to do anything with right now. So under title, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the response details, and or with a new response submit, I'm going to actually say, give me the ID for that. The submitted by, what I actually want to do here is enter a custom value, and scroll down here, and I want to say I want the email address here. And so now the department, what I can do now is scroll into my get user profile. You'll see here's the department field right here. So I can pull information from that get user info. You can see there's a lot of potential information here. We don't always have all this populated in our environment. I'm in my dev environment, so I maybe have a little bit more populated here than in our actual environment. But if there's stuff here that you want to use and it's not there, you can always feel free to outreach to us, and we can have a conversation around data and what we can do with that. All right, so I'm going to rename this action to create item record response. All right, so now we want to get into the meat of what we're doing here. So I'm going to do a new step, and what we want is we want to start processing that form information. Now, the way this is in Microsoft Forms records that information is in what's called a JSON format. And so it's a format that we can actually parse out and get variables and pass data back and forth. It's a little funky if you don't know about it, but it's actually easy to do in Power Automate. It does require a little bit of coding though, but don't get afraid by that because it is standard code, and I will copy and paste the code that I use in this demo into the description, and you can utilize that in your process. You don't have to create anything from scratch, so it's all just standardized, which is cool. All right, so what I want is I want to look for a parse JSON action, and so this is the action that we want here. So the content, I actually want to come down and I want the question that we asked that has the file information. So I'm going to scroll down, and here's the question for upload your files. Oops, you just need to do it once. And now under Schema, this is where we have to insert our code. So if I go to my text editor, you'll see that I've got the schema right here. In particular, the big things that we want to look at is this link section right here. That's going to be what we use. But as you can see, we've got name, ID, status, reference ID. There is a body to it, so you can technically get the body of the document, but it's not always, depending on the format of the document, it can be a little messy. That's why I like working with a link, is it just links you directly to the file, which is, I think, a really good way of doing it. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste that in here. All right. And so now we actually want to go through and process this. So I'm going to do a new step. And actually what I want to do right now is I want to do a apply to each action. And so if I do this, so let's go with apply to each. And what I actually want to do here is I want to click on body here. This is the only time that we're going to use body, but you know that's just the one that we want to use with this. And this is going to allow us to scan through all the different documents that are uploaded. All right, and so now we want to add another action, and we want to actually add what's called a switch. All right. What the switch allows us to do is it allows us to have multiple cases for question. And so in this case, we've got a question that we can upload up to 2 files with. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set this switch up with 2 cases, a case where file is equal to number 1, and a second case where file is equal to number 2. If you have 5 files that you want to upload, you would just do 5 cases, one for each potential file. I'm just going to do 2 here because that's in the demo here, but this is where you would just add the additional cases to handle the extra documents here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on count. All right. And so when count is equal to 1, I want to go through this column. I'm going to add another case. When count is equal to 2, I want to go through this column, and so on for the number of potential documents. So I'm going to add an action here. And what I want to actually do here now is I want to do a set variable. All right, and so now I need to select that variable. So this is going to be file 1. And under the value here, I want to go to our parse JSON, which has all of our information. I want to click on link. And that link is now going to be saved into our SharePoint site. And so let me go ahead and rename this. So this is file 1. And now I want to add another action. And what I want to do here is I want to do an update item. And I want to select that for SharePoint. And so just like the create item, what we're going to do is we're going to select our SharePoint site, which is also our Microsoft Teams site. We're going to set the list that we want to do. And then what we want to do is for the ID, you want to come under the create item here and say ID because that's what we're going to be updating. And then title's required, so I always like to bring in the title field. But then you can leave the fields blank for the ones that you don't want to update. The way that this connector works is so like file 1, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to insert the variable for file 1 here. If there's data in department, it will just leave it alone. Now, if I did want to clear that department data, then what I can do is under expressions, I can do that null expression again. And that will then clear the data in that column. But I don't want to do that. I just want to insert the file here. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to file 1. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy both of these to my clipboard. And I'm going to come over to case 2. So I'm going to add an action. I'm going to go to my clipboard. I'm going to copy the set variable. But you may run into this. So I'm clicking on the what I copied here, and it's not working. The copy to my clipboard is a preview feature, and unfortunately, preview features do have bugs in it. So if you run into this where it won't do it, you just gotta change your approach and go back and do it manually. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to set variable. And this is going to be now for file 2. The value, it will still be the link ID because now we're in the second iteration of this. And then what we want to do is add another action. And I want to update item. Let's go ahead and update the item here. Let's go here. And we want that site. We want to go to that list. The ID, we're going to use that same ID in the create item record. The title, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull in the same title. And then file 2, we're going to enter in that variable for file 2. All right, so let's go ahead and update the names here. Let's go ahead and update the name here. All right, so that's it for the cases. Now, one more thing. What we now need to do is we need to increment the count variable. And that is so that we know which case to use. So under the add action in our apply to each, what I am going to do now is I'm going to look for my variable. And I actually want to use the increment variable here now. And this is kind of nice because this is just a very quick and easy way of doing this. So I want to take my count and I want to increment it by 1. Now, if you want to increment it by 10 or 100 or something like that, depending on if you're doing some other type of file processing, you can do that very easily just by saying, I want to increment it by 100. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and save this. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to go back through and just make sure that everything is still being populated. So the way this is going to work is we'll get the response, we will get the user information, we'll record the initial response, and then we'll update the file with the appropriate file information. So now if I go to my form, and I go to preview it, I can actually now upload the document. So I'm going to upload a single document for this one. So I'm going to just use this PDF here that I've got right here. I'm going to wait for that to upload, and I'm going to hit submit. So now if I come to Power Automate, I can actually now click on the overview for this, and I can see that my flow succeeded. So let's go through the steps here. I can go through and see, okay, we got here. If I go to the apply to each, you'll see it only ran once. And so the case that ran was this first case. So if I go to my form responses, you'll see here it is. So here's my name, the department I'm in. I can actually click on the link here now, and it takes me directly to that file, which is very cool. But now say I want to resubmit with this, and I actually want to do 2 documents now. So let me go back through my preview here. I'm going to upload files, and then I'm going to upload, see if we can actually do 2 of them at once. And we can do 2 of them at once. Awesome. So you can see I got a Word document here now, and then I uploaded a PDF. I'm going to hit submit. Let's jump to Power Automate. Take a look at the overview. And looks like it beat me. So let's go to the overview here real quick. We got green check marks here. If we come to our apply to each, you'll now see that this ran twice. And so if I go to the second iteration here, you'll see that if I hit the cases, it went through case 2 instead of case 1 for that. And it also went through case 1 as well. If I go back to the previous, you'll see that that ran there. So now if I go to my form responses, you'll see under file 1, I got that file, which was the Word document, and then under file 2 is that PDF. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact the IT service desk, and thank you very much for watching this video.